Hafa day and good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for being here, everyone. The Committee on Education, Air Transportation, and Statistics Research and Planning will now convene this public hearing. Today is June 12, 2019, and it is currently 5:05 p.m. For the record and in accordance with the open government law, public notices were sent out via email to all senators, stakeholders, and all main media broadcasting outlets on June 5, 2019, and the second notice on June 10th. Notice of today's public hearing was also available on the Guam Legislature's website. With me today is our co-chair of Education, Senator Shelton. Thank you for being here. And Senator Moylan, thank you for being here. On today's agenda, we will discuss the appointment of Carolyn R.C.G. Borja to serve as a member of the Guam Education Board, and then we will move on to Bills 106-35 and Bill 107-35. I would like to call forward the appointee, Mrs. Carolyn Borja, to the table, please, and anyone who would like to give testimony on her behalf. Good afternoon, Mrs. Borja. Okay, so perhaps we'll start from my left, your right, and then we'll go down the table. Please introduce yourself, state your name for the record, and please give your testimony.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, Madam Co-Chairperson, and Senator Moylan. My name is John Birch. I'm a member of the Guam Education Board, and I thank you for allowing me to be here today on behalf of the Guam Education Board to testify in support of Governor Luliang Guerrero's nomination of Mrs. Carolyn Borja. Mrs. Borja's appointment will fulfill the legal requirement that one member appointed to the board be a parent of a student currently enrolled within the Guam Department of Education. With the recent appointment of both myself and Mr. Ray Chargalov, Jr., the Guam Education Board now has 7 members, with Mrs. Borja set to become the 8th, with the advice and consent of the Guam Legislature. Her addition as the parent member will enable us to meet our mission of helping to set policy and direction for the Guam Department of Education, and to keep the interests of parents and students at the forefront of our discussions. We ask the legislature to move forward quickly in filling this 8th board position. Serving on the Guam Education Board is a great honor, but it is also hard work. The Guam Education Board holds regular monthly meetings in the evenings and numerous work sessions, while also invited to be present out in the schools to recognize the accomplishments of our public school students throughout the year. This is in addition to participating in legislative public hearings or in community meetings whenever needed. We thank Mrs. Borja for agreeing to join us in this hard but rewarding work on behalf of the children of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Sir?
Thank you, Senator, Vice Speaker Nelson, Senator Shelton, and Senator Moylan. I'll go on record for transparency purposes and state that Carla is my cousin. Okay, and behind me is the entire Lasaru family. We call our home Maga, and I'm very proud to be up here to offer testimony on her behalf. And quite frankly, I'll take responsibility because I played an important part of recruiting her and asking her to please come and help our educational system by joining this board. I worked closely with Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio to ask her to join us and, offer her services. I can speak candidly about her being a responsible and very kind and very caring mother of 2 very wonderful boys. And she has the challenge because they're autistic kids. And when I, asked her to do this and she said, I'm willing to do it, I was quite excited because, like Mr. Birch said, it's an honor and privilege to serve on the GDUE board because I've done it also. There's a lot of hard work that needs to be put in into continuing to improve the school system for our children, most especially children that need our help. So I asked, for your full support to allow Ms. Borja to join this esteemed group of, dedicated, I call it, that's the ultimate public service, is to be on the GDOE board. Because you handle, 31,000 kids, 41 schools, 4,000 employees, and it's a tough job. So I welcome her and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Mrs. Borja.
Hafide, Vice Speaker Nelson, Senators Shelton and Moylan, thank you for being part of today's public hearing. It demonstrates your continued commitment to education on Guam, even after hours. My name is Carlin Borja, mom to Tobias and Miguel, wife to Emming, sister to Shauna, Sunny, and Seth. My parents are Joe and Terry Gogo, both former employees of the Department of Education. I am here before you today as a nominee for the Guam Education Board. Founder of the Children's Defense Fund, Marion Wright Edelman, said that education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it. Living proof of this statement can be found right here in this room. The individuals behind me were once students who are now improving the lives of others as college professors, school administrators, librarians, teachers, counselors, and support personnel, most active and some retired, all of whom I have been blessed to grow up with, as they are my family. Our parents are our first teachers, and they instill in us the importance of an education and family, all while being rooted in our Catholic faith. When I was asked to consider being on the board, my response was, but I'm just a parent. I thought to myself, what could I possibly have to offer this board? And moreover, the families that the board represents. It has been months of discernment, but with faith and determination, I have found some answers. I spent 15 years in the hospitality industry, working in public relations, sales, marketing, food and beverage, events and catering, and some of those positions through several typhoons. I gained a strong work ethic, problem-solving skills, and learned to be a team player. Working 8 years in a media organization, I have learned strength in community, that by fostering connections between people, we can help make a difference in the world. All of this work experience I will bring to my role on the Education Board. But mostly, I am a parent, a dedicated special needs parent, looking to create policies that benefit all children and families served by our public schools. I am here to ensure that the policies are inclusive of the most vulnerable of our student population. I am an advocate for my sons and an advocate for all children with special needs. The insights that Tobias and Miguel have given me are invaluable, and the voice of our special needs children and their families deserve a place on our school board. I'm organized, hardworking, and energetic. I will leverage that passion to build effective partnerships between parents, families, and schools to support children's learning, leading to improved learning outcomes. Being a board member is not just a call to public service, but a call to action. The board impacts the lives of many students in positive ways, and must be willing to grow and realize that by doing a great job with small things, greater things happen. From the policy board to DOE admin, to teachers and faculty, they all work with the vision, every student responsible, respectful, and ready for life. We must be relentless and continue to further the mission each school year. I recognize that the real work of the board is done in tireless meetings with stakeholders. A key element is being able to reflect on progress made, identifying potential trends, and strategically planning for the future. The unofficial slogan of the Peace Corps is, the toughest job you'll ever love. I've had a handful of jobs in my life, but the parenting of Tobias and Miguel is definitely the toughest job that I continue to love. Again, thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Borja. I'll open up any questions to my colleagues. We'll start with the co-chair of education, Senator Shelton.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman. Thank you very much for being here today, and congratulations on the appointment. Thank you very much for accepting the appointment. So a question that we ask to most of the appointees, if you feel that you have any potential conflict of interest while serving on the board. I know that you are currently employed with a media organization, and if you can just speak to what your role is there and how that'll affect your role on the board.
So we actually had to clear this with my employer prior to saying yes to the appointment in general. I'm actually the marking coordinator. I'm not affiliated with the newsroom, and there are different standards when it comes to the newsroom. Also, I'm not physically in the area where the newsroom is. I am at an off-site location. So we've been vetted by our legal counsel at corporate, and there is no conflict of interest.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that answer. And what you spoke to about your role there, I know that you respect how the media can be used to play a vital role to pass out information to our public, and so I appreciate that. I would like to just hear a little bit more about your thoughts and priorities of what you'd like to see happen while on the board, or what you think can be done to advance the department.
So that's kind of an interesting question, only because there's still a lot more things to know and understand about my role on the board. I understand there'll be an orientation period. Right now I've only been looking at what's been in the media, what's been happening in my children's schools, but beyond that, I'm not ready to give an answer to that quite yet. There's still a lot of things I need to find out. There's just still a lot of things I need to find out before I can honestly give you a truthful answer as to what exactly I'm going to prioritize and how I'll be able to conduct myself on the board.
Sure, thank you for that honesty, but I'm sure from the support that we heard here today that you're well equipped to take on those challenges and learn quickly. So I have the confidence in you, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Shelton. Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mrs. Borja, for accepting the nomination. Sometimes when you got some great people and a lot of people behind you, and they really say great things about you, that means one thing to me is that they can't wait for you to get to work. So I applaud you for accepting the position. I'm looking forward to the great things you'll bring to the board. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Borja, for accepting this appointment, and thank your family also for coming out and showing their support. It really does take a lot of our family support that we are able to achieve our successes. So thank you, family members, for coming. In the 17 GCA Education Statute, subsection 3102.1, states the duties of the Guam Education Board. Some of them is to select and appoint a superintendent and support him and her in the discharge of his or her duties. Another is adopt an annual budget and control expenditures accordingly, review periodic financial reports, and modify the budget if and when necessary. Another is to report routine complaints and concerns related to the department's operations to the superintendent for appropriate investigation and response. And so this is just some of the meatier parts, right? The more politically influenced areas that your duty as a board member will have to discern on. And so, especially when it comes to the budget, I implore you that you take a look at how the finances are being spent, and if they feel that it should be used to hire more teachers or more one-to-one aides,
Yes.
then I hope that you advocate for that. I'm very moved by your testimony, especially involving your sons, and so I'm excited to see someone that can push, that a sense of care forward, for our children that have special needs. It's nice to know that you're there because you have firsthand experience, so you'll be able to really advocate for them. And especially the training that you've undergone I admire that you took time off to be a stay-at-home mom, which was probably not time off. But,
That was a full-time job at home. Yes.
absolutely, right? And so thank you for doing that. I really don't have any questions for you, but I want to thank you wholeheartedly for accepting this appointment. I'm very certain that you'll be a great advocate for the children at the Board of Education should you be nominated and confirmed. Thank you very much, Mrs. Borja.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is Bill number 106-35, as introduced by Telena C. Nelson, Joe S. San Augustine, Amanda L. Shelton, and James C. Moylan. Bill number 106-35 is an act to amend subsection 12107 F and N, 1211 ABD, 121116, 1211 B, C, and E of Chapter 12, Title 17, GCA, relative to removing the duties of the Superintendent of Education and the Guam Education Board to amend subsection 12103G, 12108A, 12111A of Chapter 12, Title 17, Guam Code annotated relative to establishing standards for the Guam Academy Charter School Council, Board of Trustees and Appeals Board, and to add subsection 121G and H of Chapter 12, Title 17, GCA, relative to establishing rules for the Charter School Council, and to amend subsection 12106A and subsection 12116F of Chapter 12, Title 17, GCA, relative to establishing deadlines, and to add subsection 12116G of Chapter 12, Title 17, GCA, relative to regulating charter school appropriations subsequent to the revocation of an Academy Charter Schools charter. I'd like to call those who are here to testify. Please just come forward to the table. I understand it was a meaty listing, but they are all connected. Mr. Superintendent, we'll just start with you. Please state your name for the record.
John Fernandez, the Superintendent, Guam Department of Education. You should have it should be a short written testimony from me. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I come in to testify in support of both bills, and with some comment for potential, hopefully, refinement. For Bill 106, testifying in support, the bill attempts to address the repeated requests of the Guam Education Board, and I would probably say from the charter schools as well, to separate the Guam Department of Education budgetarily and operationally from the charter schools by doing the following, and I think you've said some of it: removing the superintendent from serving on the appeals board, removing the requirement of the Academy Charter School of an Academy Charter School to submit reports to the superintendent and the Guam Education Board, remove the superintendent from the Charter School Council, as well as remove the DOE and the superintendent and the board from the budget process, as well as the expenditure approval process. So we support each of these measures. We would, however, require, if we could, that there be clearer language that indicates that there will be separate appropriations for DOE and for the charter schools. I think the bill implies it, or in the language being used. But if there were just clear language that says that these appropriations are separate, that would help. Just because, as you know, the other component here is what happens in the Budget Act when some things get added to it. So, but with that understood, we definitely believe that would be that was the intent of the board as well in requesting that separation. I also would like to address one more area where the separation could be clearer, and that has to do with the existing section 12114 subsection E of chapter 12, which requires that DOE manage a charter school in the event that the school's charter is revoked. I think it would be more appropriate that the Guam Academy Charter School Council be equipped to, since they issued the charter initially and are charged with the regular oversight and monitoring of the school, to be able to manage that school's transition. I think that we definitely would be part of that conversation, but I don't know that it doesn't seem that it would make sense for DOE to be separated from full responsibility, but then have to come in on an emergency basis should the charter school, for some reason, fail to sustain its charter. So that would just be, I think, along the lines of indicating a clear separation of authority and responsibility. I just suggested the Charter School Council perhaps might be the entity that would need to be equipped to manage that transition, and whether it's DOE that gets requested to come in or another charter school perhaps to come in and help manage that charter school transition, we'd be open to that. But that's the suggestion. There are some minor suggestions as well. So we do support the direction to remove the superintendent from the appeals board. I just wanted to comment because this has always been a kind of a curiosity for me that the president of GCC and UOG would also be members of the appeals board. There are situations where you might imagine that a charter school might contract with GCC or UOG for services, one way or the other, and then an appeal coming to the appeals board might present a conflict of interest. So it might be something to take a look at whether there's another way to just construct an appeals board in a way that might foresee some of these potential conflicts. I do have another comment with regard to the appeals board that didn't make it into the testimony, but before I arrived here, I took a look at the DC law because about 47% of public school students go to charter schools in the District of Columbia. Actually, what happens is that the charter school authorizing board makes the decision to do a revocation, and the decision is a final decision that is appealable up to a court, and there's a judicial review instead of having an interim appeals board and then potentially go up to a court. So in the DC law, the public charter school board would make the decision on revocation, and then it would be subject to judicial review as the appeal, and the courts then would then render a decision. I think the standard is whether the charter school board has made an arbitrary or capricious decision. But there might be just some clarity on that. And then finally, we removed the requirement to submit annual reports to DOE and GEB. So I thought it would be helpful, whether it's a charter school or the Charter School Council, to produce some type of annual report that would be available to the public one way or the other, just the way that DOE is required to. I think that would be along the lines of transparency for all public funded agencies, that there be some kind of useful report that both the Department of Education, charter schools will all be subject to. So those are just suggestions. Bill 107-35, with regard to the requirements and the accountability measures for charter schools, I just testified in support of it. Whether the revocation language gets done in 106 or 107, because it's kind of relative to both, up to the committee. But again, we support both measures.
Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent, and thank you for your support. Speaker Wanpat, former Speaker Wanpat.
Buenas and half a day. Thank you very much, Senators, for holding this public hearing and for the introduction, of course, of bills number 106 and 107. There was this discussion at one time when you had an oversight to basically ask the charter schools where they're at and where they're going, and through that discussion, there are some of these issues that materialized in Bill 106 and 107, so thank you for that. I have to say that, I agree with my colleague here to the right, with Mr. Fernandez. I am not objecting to that. As a matter of fact, when the bill was first written, I had actually worked with the superintendent, and he had asked at the time, because it was new, if the superintendent could be a part of it, so they'll be able to know where the charter schools are going, how is it going to affect their budget, and that amendment was made, and then here we are now to remove the superintendent, and it's a living document because the charter schools, of course, is very new to the island, and we're learning, and we're having to make changes as we grow. So I truly understand where he was coming from, and in terms of that removal, in terms of the separation of the budget, because as we indicated before, and they would they can verify is that they've actually passed maybe, I think, 15 resolutions to that fact, that there be that separation with the budget. However, I know what the process is like in the legislature as well, when the legislature is scrambling for monies, and how then you want to apportion those monies out, because when the governor sends the budget down, she does not submit, it's a general lump sum that the legislature, you yourselves, are really going to have to make that real hard decision for the other branches and for, the judiciary, the Attorney General's office, the mayors, and education, which is, a real big portion of it. So I can appreciate, where you're going to be coming from, and I think it would just make it a lot easier for you and everyone if there is this separation. So Bill 106, as I was going through the bill and the amendments, I don't have any objections. However, I do have a question, and that is on the funding portion, and specifically the date for June 15 as the date to submit the report. We're not objecting to the report at all. It's very important that reports be made in terms of what the enrollment data is. However, in the school system, and when a charter school is starting up, normally around like late spring and early summer is when the recruitment actually is happening and when enrollment is actually taking place, and you really wouldn't be knowing where all of your students are coming from. So, and this seems to be a hard date by the 15th. The superintendent will tell you, and all principals will tell you, is that the numbers I know varies, and normally at the beginning of the school year is the highest, and then towards the end of the year it's the lowest. But in this case, for the council, for the charter schools to submit actual information might be a little bit difficult, because then and I'll give you an example for us right now. Naturally, we're taking all of the kids that from their previous grades is moving up to the next grade, and we have those numbers, but we're still registering students, and by June 15, which will be in a couple of days, then I won't have the full complement actually to report to the council and then to the legislature. So I just wanted to know then whether this is a hard, fast date. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, and I'm looking to you, to let us know.
Right, so we were working with the state because in one of the many roundtable hearings that we've had, or informational hearing that we had with charter schools and meetings, they were actually asking for May 15th to be an enrollment deadline, because the provision was to actually remove the cap for charter schools. And so without hindering DOE's function and the rest of the budgetary process, we were in agreement that May 15th was the date that the charter schools would submit enrollment so that we would know how much to budget for the charter school. We pushed it another month further because it took a little while to write this bill. So if there's some recommendation you have to perhaps make it more feasible.
Only because I want to find out, because I'm hoping that June 15th would not be the cutoff date where we're going to tell all parents that you can't register anymore by June 15th. That's my fear.
So what do you recommend, Speaker?
Well, the numbers, I mean, I know because by law now you have to pass a budget by the end of August. And right now, the way it's been working, when you actually place a cap on us, what DOE currently does is that then at the beginning of the year, they would ask what our count is, and then at the end of September, they would also ask for another count. And because the beginning of the school year really is a better mark in terms of determining what it is, but it doesn't meet your budget requirement. And that's why I'm saying that it would be best that, you do have a cap. But like today, I'll tell you right now, we have slightly under 600 students. And today, at this date, and our cap was 740. And so if I'm going to turn this date in by next week to the council, it would be at 600. It would not be at the cap that we were operating under of 740.
So this date was an agreement that we went through our charter schools, and they agreed to have it on June 15th. But perhaps we can make an amendment that perhaps states that if you do not meet your enrollment cap, then you have until such time to meet your enrollment cap.
Yes, that would work.
Okay.
But
Instead of June 15th.
you're right, because we're
'Cause
still
you're still
registering
trying to
students.
enroll
As
students.
we're also registering
Okay.
even in the first week of school. That happens throughout all the schools. Parents, change their minds, and then they start withdrawing their children or registering them in another school.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. The other question that I have, or rather, the last subsection of G, all remaining funds appropriated to this charter school at the end of the fiscal year shall be reverted back to the general fund. And currently, of course, that's not the case, where it doesn't revert to the general fund, but it actually stays with DOE, being that it's under DOE. And I'm wondering, or would like to see the language that the remaining funds, you see, normally at the end of the year, you make that decision again for the budget is one, to allow for either a carryover or to allow for the current fiscal year budget to be used to address and take care of any previous obligations. And I'm looking to this section to do just that. An example where we're at right now, and I know we've been in the news, and I'm not going to deny that, is that we would be able to address many of those debts that we have to, the various vendors, if we're actually allowed to use our current funding and make good those payments to our vendors, rather than us now having to go through the process of going to the OPA or maybe even going to the courts or what have you. We really could address that. We were able then to set those monies aside to be able to do it, and I'm hoping that language instead would be allowed for us to do that. And more importantly then is because at the end of the school year, as we're closing up, we're of course needing to spend our money. And I don't want this to be, and I remember Klitsky at the time when he was the director.
So some of our agencies do that now. The money that they have, they don't spend it all. It doesn't go back to the general fund. It stays within the agency and used for prior year obligations.
Yes.
Okay.
We're not talking about a lot of money here
Right,
when it
I
comes to
understand.
us. You're right.
Right, just,
Yeah.
okay, Speaker, Acting Dr. Wanpat, thank you for the recommendation.
Thank you.
We note that.
For 107. Right. Thank you.
Is there anything else?
No, that's for 106. I'm sorry. You doing both? Oh, yes, because you're able to.
Yeah, let's just move on with 107. Is there anyone that would like to give testimony for bill number 106? No? Amanda? Oh, thank you for coming. It's nice to see you. Yes, Ms. Bloss, please. Thank you, Ms. Bloss, for being here. Please go ahead and state your name for the record.
So half a day, my name is Amanda Bloss, and I am the chairwoman of the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council. On behalf of the council, we appreciate the opportunity to testify on Bill 106 and 107. In regard to Bill 106, the council would like to highlight the following. First, Bill 106 separates the charter school funding from the Department of Education funding, establishing the Guam Academy Charter School Fund. However, the bill does not state who will monitor charter schools' appropriations and spending, which is currently shouldered by the Department of Education. Per the current appropriations law, Public Law 34-116, each Academy Charter School shall submit a monthly invoice to DOA, which shall be remitted to GDOE. Upon receipt of this invoice, GDOE shall verify accuracy of the invoice and report its findings within 10 days of receipt of said invoice by the GDOE prior to the release of funds. If charter school funding is no longer coming from GDOE funds, is GDOE still expected to monitor charter school spending? If not, is the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council expected to monitor the charter schools' appropriations and spending? The Council currently does not have the resources necessary to do this, as the Council lacks the administrative staff to perform its existing duties and responsibilities. An added responsibility of monitoring charter school appropriations and spending would require the Council to have full-time staff with experience in finance and budgets. Additionally, Bill 106 states, "Thus, it is the intent of the legislature to separate the Guam Academy Charter Schools' budgetary and organizational process from that of the Guam Department of Education. However, aside from the submission requirement mentioned in Section 12116 of the current charter school law, and the above-mentioned process of remitting invoices, as stated in the appropriations law, there are no clear budgetary processes for charter schools that do not include GDOE. If there is no clear budgetary process for the charter schools and no clear monitor of charter schools' appropriation and spending, how will the separation of the budgets and the establishment of the Guam Academy Charter School Fund be responsibly carried out? While the Council supports greater flexibility for charter schools, there needs to be accountability measures in place." Second, in Section 12116, funding of Bill 106, it is stated, "The Council shall submit budgets of Academy Charter Schools and their respective enrollment data to include the origin of each student to the legislature by June 15th. In the past, budget hearings were typically held as early as January. Will a budget request submission due date in mid-June affect the charter school's ability to testify on their budget requests? With the exception of this year, charter schools have not been given the opportunity to testify on their budget requests. In fact, 2 years ago, the charter schools had made their own budget hearing at a bill public hearing. The Council supports charter schools' ability to defend their budget requests in the same way other entities that receive government funding are able to. In regard to Bill 107 and the extension of the period in which a charter school shall attain accreditation from 5 years to 6 years, 2 out of the 3 existing charter schools have received notice of their accreditation status within 5 years. I-Learn Academy Charter School attained accreditation within 5 years prior to the expiration of their charter, and similarly, Guahan Academy Charter School received notification regarding the final decision of their accreditation prior to the expiration of their charter. Lastly, both Bills 106 and 107 fail to highlight the Council's lack of resources, which in turn affects the Council's ability to fully perform its duties and responsibilities and support the charter schools. As the legislature considers these 2 bills related to charter schools, the Council also asks the legislature consider the Council's budget request for fiscal year 2020, which includes administrative staff, necessary supplies, and dedicated office space. Strengthening the Council will ultimately strengthen Guam's charter schools as a whole. Guam's charter schools were created to increase learning opportunities for students and encourage the use of different and innovative teaching methods. We ask legislature to consider the concerns of the Council and the charter schools in their deliberation of the 2 bills.
So I guess we jumped into 107 also. Thank you
Sorry,
very much.
we just combined the
Thank you.
testimony.
Dr. Monpads, on Bill 107?
Thank you. And I know we haven't spoken, but I totally agree, Senators. I want you to know is that we do want accountability. I think that's really very important. But it's not just accountability just for the charter schools. I think this should be like a policy of the government. I've been hearing a lot of negative media out there attacking charter schools, and unfortunately, they're saying that there's no transparency, we need accountability, and I totally support that 100%, so I agree with Amanda. But in order to make that happen, we need to strengthen then the council, and the council can be that group then to hold all charter schools, accountable, that we're following the law. So I totally agree with her on that. The question I have, though, for Bill 107 is on section 6 now, where it says, and I'm glad that the number of days went up from 90 days to 100 and 80 days to be able to cure whatever the problem is. And so, but my question is, and very similar to what we're going through, is that all those within our control, then I believe that yes, the 180 days is more than sufficient. Matters outside of our hands that may take a year or two, I have no control of that. And the example I'll give you would be, of course, the withholding of accreditation for grades 6 to 12. The immediate cure was that then we took the secondary children back to the main campus. That's an immediate cure. However, the long-term cure now that I have no control is the timeline that is set by the WASC team. So that means I would go through the process of applying for affiliation and then having them come to visit, and then we submit our reports, we do the self-study, and then they come out and visit. That's their process. I have no control of that time frame. And I don't want this to be, I'm not sure what language you'll be able to use that, but to apply here, but it has to be reasonable, those within that we can control. The time frame is more than sufficient.
Thank you, Speaker. Would you like to give some testimony?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving us this time. I'm also in support of Bill 106 and Bill 107. However, I'm in support of the 6 years only because of this. iLearn Academy was able to obtain its accreditation within the 5-year, but until the council is strengthened and supported, iLearn is currently in the position of coming into the 5th year without a quorum to renew. So iLearn, being the only charter school to receive accreditation, is at risk of not being renewed because there is currently no quorum in the council. So by allowing the 6 year, that would give us another year to be able to work on getting that done. Other than anything else, we're okay with Bill 107, except for the fact that we feel that the council should be supported and strengthened. I know there is a portion of the charter school law that says the certification office will serve as an administrative system, but when you're talking about a group of people who are only receiving a stipend, that's not really easy to work around. So I think they need administrative support outside of the certification office.
That's right. And can you please state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm Helen Nishihira from iLearn Academy Charter School.
Okay. So just to answer some of the concerns before we move forward, Ms. Blas, DOE will be facilitating the funding appropriations for the charter schools. We met with all the charter schools and we confirmed that they do have the capability to manage their own funds and disperse their own funds accordingly. To address the council and how they're supported by the Guam Certification Office, we are looking to remove this piece and to allow the Guam Academy Council, Charter School Council, to have their own appropriation for their own full-time employee. There was a conflict of interest and also some issues with the law that could put some of the certifying officers in conflict with acting on the council's behalf as far as administrative assistance. So we're building that bill as well. So we're doing some cleanup in that manner. So thank you for bringing that up. And sir, you'd like to give some testimony?
Yes, Hafaday. Thank you again, Chairperson, for allowing us to speak today. My name is Anthony Sunga. I'm the Board of Trustees for SIFA Learning Academy, and I just like to sit here and stand in support of Bill 106 and 107 and its intentions. Again, I also like to reiterate that the importance of the strengthening the council and then giving them more power and more resources to actually help the charter schools and manage this. So thank you again for having all of these working sessions with the charter schools, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And please note that we have written 2 letters to our governor to ask them, please appoint members to the council. So we've been trying at least bi-weekly to get in touch and see where we are at with that. Do you have a new appointee?
I did submit a name earlier this week, and I also did ask for an update from the governor's legal office, and I haven't received a response yet. But I do know that our schools have sent numerous names, and I wanted to see at what point we're at with that. And like I said, I have interested individuals coming my way, and I send them directly to there as well.
Great. All right, thank you so much, Madam Chair. Attorney Terlahi, please state your name for the record.
Hafaday Senators, Jacqueline Terlahi. I'm an attorney and I represent Guahan Academy Charter School. I'm here today to testify in support of Bill 10635 and to ask the legislature for kind consideration in certain provisions of 10635. Generally speaking, Guahan Academy does in fact support 10635 because it meets the original intention of the charter school law, and that was to separate the charter schools completely from the Guam Department of Education. And so what has happened over the years is there's been some sort of integration and intertwinement in terms of the funding and the release of funding. Senators, you're very familiar with the problems that the charter schools are having with the release of the funding because you're intimately familiar with it because you've been working actively with the different charter schools. But what we're proposing is in terms of your bill, you have asked to modify the language of the statute so that it restricts the use of the funds to appropriated funds. And we're very concerned as charter schools about this particular provision of the bill. And this is found in section 712116 in reference to the word appropriated fund or appropriated budget. And the reason why we're concerned about this is because this would restrict all charter schools to control their budgets only within the appropriated year. So the impact that this kind of language would have on all our charter schools we would be prohibited essentially by law from entering any contracts in excess of the appropriated year. So for example, I'll use something very basic because it's me, I'm a lawyer. I entered into a contract with my client pursuant to a request for procurement, and they asked that I submit a bid for a 3-year term, an initial 1 year and a renewable term. Well, if you restrict the charter schools to say they can only act within their appropriated budget, essentially the law will then nullify their ability to meet the contract that they've entered into with me to provide them services. I don't believe that that was the intent of the senators when you put the bill together, but I wanted to bring that to your attention of the consequences of that type of language. What we want to do is to have the ability to enter contracts just like the original law intended. If you look at the original charter law, the intent was to create essentially an entity that can enter into legal obligations, that can sue and be sued, so that they act as an independent body of the Department of Education and of the government of Guam. It was never the intention of the charter school system that these entities would essentially become kind of a quasi-governmental entity. So by adding this particular language, by saying appropriated, that is the one area of the law that we're asking the senators to strike, essentially. We are encouraging the senators to use the language of approved budget. And the reason why that is because if you look at the charter language, the way that it works is that we are required to go to our council. We ask the council to approve our budget based on our plan. So not only does the council approve the plan for the school, but they also approve our budget. And so based on that approved budget, we should be able to enter into certain obligations that would assist us in meeting that plan. And so that's one of the restrictions I think that was not contemplated. We're also asking the senators to consider the lifting and to repeal the provision that prevents us from using public funds for construction, reconstruction, and improving the school. As you know, you're very familiar as well with this particular provision. It's in Section D of the funding provision yet again. And in that particular section, we're asking you to strike that provision. Why? Because the law already protects the government of Guam in the use of its funds. If the senators look specifically at the charter school law, if we decide to close down our school for whatever reason, because we are not able to meet the charter school mission, or because the council determines that we are no longer qualified, for example, and our school closes down, well, under the provisions of Guam law already, what happens is all of our assets go back to the government of Guam. So to place this kind of restriction on us that tells us you can't construct, you can't renovate, you can't improve, basically prohibits any of the charter schools from making their campuses fit to suit accreditation. And so this particular provision presents a huge impediment to our schools from expanding and moving forward. It impacts mostly GACs because Guahan Academy sits on government land now, pursuant to a memorandum of understanding with the government of Guam. So essentially, if we cannot utilize any portion of our funding towards construction or towards renovation, then we are perpetually going to sit on government land. We don't want that. We haven't envisioned that. In fact, the plan that was approved by the council allows us to expand. And we have expanded. Essentially, we've acquired land in pursuit of having our own campus so that we can at least relieve the government of some of the obligations. I mean, that's, I hope, the idea behind the charter schools, to allow us to do that at some point. And respectfully, senators, I think one of the other issues that perhaps can be addressed in terms of your intention to separate the charter schools from the Guam Department of Education is also to mandate that our Department of Administration follow a charter school fund, that all the funds that you appropriate for the charter schools should go into a direct fund, should not go into the Department of Education fund. It should go specifically to charter. And the reason why that is because what has been happening in previous years is that the legislature imposed an obligation on the Department of Education to verify invoices. And in certain cases, the Department of Education has non-validated certain invoices, and as a result, the charter schools were not allowed to receive their allotment. For whatever reason, the non-validation occurred, whether it was a procurement dispute, whether they thought that they shouldn't have entered into the contract, whether or not they thought the contract was bad, it didn't meet certain terms, irrespective of the reasons. In the end result was the charter school did not get the funds that the legislature ordered, that the legislature approved. In the end, what happens is, for example, in the GAC situation, we had $2 million of appropriation that was never validated, and in essence, it never came to GACs, even though it was approved by the legislature. And in the end, it ended up in the coffers of the Department of Education. And at the end of the fiscal year, the Department of Education was free to appropriate those funds for another purpose. Again, I don't believe that was the intention of the senators when you approved the budget for the charter schools. And I think that by separating the charter schools into their own fund that is purely administered by the Department of Education also meets the intention of the Senate in passing the charter school law, so that the charter schools get the benefit of the fund that was agreed upon. The last thing I wanted to offer to the senators with respect to this bill in terms of the separation is also the audit provision. If you look at the specific provisions of the charter school law, there's only really one reference to the public auditor. There are other laws that say if you receive X amount of money over government funds, you're subject to an audit. In the charter school law, it's very unclear to what extent the public auditor has authority. And so in this particular instance, we are also offering to the Senate consideration that if you are going to also separate the Department of Education, you should also clarify the role of the public auditor. That the public auditor's role should be that to audit charter schools, and if that's your intention, if that's the policy behind these bills in transparency, that really you should clarify the powers of the public auditor. I have provided to your office proposed language for that, so that that language is also consistent with current law as it relates to the public auditor. In fact, I have the language of it now, and it says, for the sole purpose of permitting audits as set forth in 12 GCA 12107 N8, that's the charter school provisions, the public auditor shall audit charter schools who receive public funds in excess of $5 million annually. The public auditor is authorized to supervise audits or at the public auditor's discretion exercise the authority to make the selection of the auditing firm or organization and the scope of the audits are to be at the cost of the charter schools, which said costs may be included in its annual budget. And this particular language that we are proposing for your consideration also encourages absolute transparency. If the Senate and the intention of the original provision of GDOE's verification or validation was the intention of this Senate, then this particular provision allows the public auditor to have full scope of audit just like any autonomous agency, which allows the public auditor to give the kind of transparency I think that the senators would prefer. And so if we have the public auditor fully auditing charter schools the same way, then what happens is that if you establish a charter school fund, what happens is that the Department of Administration has more ability to freely release the allotments without these disputes between the Department of Education and the charter schools. I think what you have here is a very good bill with good intentions. I think that it's perhaps considering some of the issues that the charter schools have had in recent months, perhaps that some of the recommendations that we are making would help you solve those problems for us. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Attorney Chalahi. So we are looking into the roles and responsibilities of the OPA in reference to how it will audit the charter schools. And we know that was a big contention one of our last hearings, so we're seeing what we can do to that. And of course, you know, to be fair and equitable across the board for all agencies as well. Senator Shelton, do you have any questions? No? Is there anyone that would like to give additional testimony? No? Okay, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today and for contributing your time to helping us do a better job at our job. It's very important that we get the community's input, so I thank you very much for being here. And we will work on the recommendations that has been given to us, and if there are any challenges or issues or something that we feel that perhaps we can come to a compromise in, then we will give everyone a call and produce a new bill and push it forward in the next upcoming session so that we can fix this as soon as possible. We have exhausted everything on our agenda today. The time is now 6:03 p.m. Thank you very much for all of your time. Have a good evening and God bless.